Hello and welcome to the Sunnyview School's podcast made by students for students. I'm Albert Chavarría. I'll be your host for today as usual. And as usual as well, I'm surrounded by beautiful people. The beautiful people today are...
Hello, I'm Mr. McKean. I just want to say thank you to Elsa for stepping in last week into my shoes as I could not be here. And thank you for those that have continued to listen over the last 10 episodes.
I'm Marianna. This is, I think, my second time on the podcast. Actually sat down, but I'm usually in the audience. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm Elena, and this is my second time as well. Thank you for having me.
I'm Gabe Chavarría, and I'm also the second time on here.
Right. Excellent. Gabe and I go way back.
Good.
Sorry, Gabe.
No, that's good, because then if we ask questions today and you're not, happy with those answers and you feel that he could give more, then
get the truth.
Get the real truth, the scoop here today, guys. The scoop.
All right, so what are we talking about today?
Well, today and this week in particular is a big week for me and my department, as it is Literacy Week at Sunnyview School, and tomorrow is World Book Day. So with that in mind, I wanted to bring to the podcast today the topic of reading, reluctant readers, how to get people into reading, and just that in general with school. So I think a good starting point would be, do you read? Ma, let's start with you.
Yes, I love reading. Unfortunately, because of these past, I'd say 4 months, I haven't been reading as much as I'd like to, but reading is definitely my passion. I enjoy reading all genres. And I do understand the idea of not wanting to read, because sometimes, especially nowadays, because Gen Z, and I think it's going to be worse for the next generation, our attention span has been seriously impacted by TikTok and Instagram, even shows that we're overstimulating as children that we watched. It's all causing a lack of concentration when it comes to reading. And reading is one of those things that you have to sit down and tell yourself, I'm going to read now, and just focus on that one thing. Because when your mind starts to wander, you could still be reading the pages, but nothing is actually processing. So I understand people who don't necessarily read or don't like it, and I've been in that situation as well, so I am empathetic.
Lovely. Elena?
I do read a lot as well, and as Marianna said, I think because of the exam stress and just that I've been doing a lot of work, I haven't had as much time to just sit down and relax to read, because I feel like that's an important part, that you can't be concentrating on something else, because when you're reading, you have to immerse yourself in the book to really understand it and get the joy out of reading. I've always read lots of books since I was young. I know there's the app Goodreads, and I'm on it, and I see Marianna's very active, but I never update anything that I read. But I definitely do suffer from reader's block sometimes, where I just have so many books, and I think, I really want to read all of these, but they're just sitting on my shelf and I'm not reading any of them. But once when I do find the time and I do pick up a book that I like, then I remind myself how enjoyable reading actually is, and then I do start reading again.
Lovely. And Gabe?
I don't really read that much. I've probably read, before this year, I probably never read a book, to be honest.
Everybody looks at me.
Cries in literature teacher over here. Okay.
And yeah, I read the Harry Potter series at the beginning of the year, and then I read another Star Wars book a couple of weeks after that. I haven't read a book or touched a book really for a couple months. I've just been doing other stuff, studying and things like that, but I never really read ever.
Okay. And now let's ask your father.
I love reading, but I never do it. I really have no time. I mean, I know it sounds like an excuse, but I don't. I read a lot of textbooks, I study a lot, so I have to read a lot of technical books. But I don't actually read for pleasure, and I absolutely love it. I used to hate it, though, just like Gabe, and I picked it up pretty much at Gabe's age. It took me that long to start liking to read.
Okay, so then with that in mind, what can we do as a school, or what can you do to kind of encourage others to read? So that's to any of you guys there.
I think people, because it's so hard, because it does have to require a certain amount of dedication from someone to actually sit down, pick up a book and tell yourself, I'm going to read this book. But I think what's most important to remember is that there is a book for everyone out there. I think that there are some books that are like for 90% of the population, like Harry Potter. Maybe not 90%, but like 70%. I think most people, if you sit down and you were to read it, I think you would immerse yourself in it, even if you're not a big reader like Gabe, because the books are just spectacular. They're very well written, and it's just super, I guess, addictive. That's how I felt when I was reading them. Like after I finished one, I tell my mom, we have to go to the store. Like I have to get the next one because you just like you're dying to know. So I think that is probably, I honestly think Harry Potter, that's what got me into reading as well, Harry Potter. So I think that's probably, especially for like younger readers, not even, it's Harry Potter's so universal, anyone at any age can read it. So I think that from like year 6 onwards, I think teachers should seriously push the kids into reading
How old
Harry
were you,
Potter.
Mar?
I was 11.
Right.
When I first came to the school, everyone was talking about Harry Potter. That was like the thing. So I was like, okay, I have to read it now. I don't really like reading, but my parents from a young age always pushed me to read. So...
Okay, and what do you two think? How would you encourage people to get into reading?
Well, I think you don't need to start with anything that difficult, not even a thick book, not something that you think, oh, wow, this is advanced literary level. I think you can start with something quite basic, but you need to look, because there are so many genres of books that you need to look at something that you like. So maybe think of like films that you like, if you like adventure films, if you like, I don't know, science fiction, that you sort of translate that into books so that you start with something that you know that you will enjoy it, and then start there, because as Marianna said, there is probably a book out there for everyone, and it just depends what will actually get you into reading. But I think first you need to dedicate yourself and just do a bit of research on what type of books you think you'll like.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and Gabe, for you as our reluctant reader, so to speak.
Well, what got me interested was I was playing it's probably like 2 years old, Harry Potter game.
Yeah, what, Hogwarts Legacy?
Hogwarts Legacy.
Great game.
It is a very good game.
To get it.
And yeah, then I just started watching the movies, and I've always had the books in my small bookshelf in my room that belongs to my parents.
Okay.
And yeah, I was like, well, I'll give it a try, and yeah, I really like them.
Okay, so with that in mind, then obviously some of you have talked about kind of the input of school. Do you think school could do more to help encourage readers or get people into reading? And if so, what would that look like? I always worry, thinking back to my experience as a student, that there were certain novels that I felt my school killed, or certain kind of ideas that, where you go so far in depth that you kind of just want to get rid of that book and never see it again. So what would you say that the role of school is?
I think that like our school, this is how I always see it, our school's very much pushes reading on us. At least that's how I always felt, like coming in here and seeing that. And I think it was also, like I said, my classmates that were very big readers, like Shania and Naira. I always remember them, and V as well, like my childhood friends, they loved reading. So that kind of entorno, those surroundings are what crafts a reader, I think. But the thing is, like, as I said, reading is becoming more and more foreign, or at least like the kind of books that people read are becoming, because don't get me wrong, there are still a lot of readers, but the quality of literature is like not good. I'm not saying that just because a book is easy to read doesn't mean that it's not good quality.
Right.
I want to like reiterate that.
Yeah.
It's just like Harry Potter, that's an easy read, I'd say, but you're still getting so much from the text. There's still so much story to it.
Right.
And that's like a fairly easy read. Same with Percy Jackson. I think also very good for children, or for like, preteens or even teenagers. I would reread it now because that's how interesting I find it.
Right.
But I do think that, especially like with people our age, it's the stuff that's in these books is very questionable.
Definitely.
I don't want to talk about what it is because it's not appropriate, but it's
So not appropriate topics there.
Yeah, not appropriate topics.
Right, okay.
So I think the school just needs to, I think it's just about encouraging each individual person, because when there's more and more readers in a class, that encourage, it's literally like a domino effect.
Right.
So I really think it's that simple.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think it's also important to bear in mind too that the school, and as teachers, we're not expecting students to read kind of, these like novels like War and Peace. If you want to read War and Peace, that's great, but you don't have to. I mean, I don't go home and sit and kind of peruse kind of Shakespearean plays and things like that, because I love a cozy crime novel like that. For me, you know, with a cup of coffee sitting on my sofa, that's my idea of a lovely evening, right? I don't sit there and kind of go through all these amazing epics and things like that. That just doesn't get it for me. Or even graphic novels, I've really started getting into those, you know, recently. I think that's definitely a genre that people forget. And I think as a teacher, I try and encourage, even when I was teaching with Macbeth, we have in our library, we have the graphic novel of Macbeth, and I think it's really well done, and it's probably much more accessible. So I think you brought up a very good point there. What about for you guys? What was the environment then in your classrooms, Elena and Gabe, like with reading, do you think, within your friendship groups, do you think, and does that have an effect? Like for Marianna?
Well, when I was younger, my closest friends, they were big readers, both Nico and Ewan. Nico's not in school anymore, but he did read a lot before. But then as I got older, I never read, but they stopped as well, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, my other friends never read either.
Right.
So
okay,
yeah, I think it's a mixture of both environments from when I was older.
Right.
I mean, none of us read, so it's kind of a bit like, I'm not going to read either, you know?
That makes,
if my friends are over there playing FIFA, I'm going to play with them instead of just reading a book.
Of course.
You know?
Which harks back to Marianna's point of the idea of, you know, the stimulation that we're now getting and what keeps us there. Just want to give a side note. I have been Gabe's English teacher in the past, and I think it was one of my favourite pieces of information that came to me this year was finding out that he was reading a book. Finally, it felt like that kind of like crowning moment. I was like, that it was very satisfying to hear. Elena, what about your environment growing up?
Oh, well,
in
I
school?
think because of Marianna. I mean, I did always read a lot, but Marianna has lent me lots of books and always said, oh, you should read this book. And then she'd give it to me and then I would read it. So in that sense, I would read more. Also, during lunch times or tutorial breaks or whatever, I'd see her read and I'd have my book too. And it would also I just thought, oh, okay, I'll read too because she's reading. So that definitely did encourage me to read. And I did remember that. I'm not sure if they do it here, they might, but at my old school, for example, we did have one reading lesson per week.
Yeah, we do.
So that you had to do that, but then you couldn't have anything else on your desk apart from a book, and it was your decision or not whether you read the book. But I think that sort of allowed some people to actually start reading it because you only had your book in front of you, and you can either sit there and do nothing or you could read. And I think some people did start reading, and then maybe especially with younger children, that after a week or so you update on how the book is going and what's what you've read.
Okay.
You know what else could... Sorry, Albert, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I think, like, because I know that there's library buddies, helpers of the library,
Friends of the library,
friends of the library,
are essential to the running of our library, I have to say.
Yeah, no, it's
With
really
Miss
cute.
Olmeda, who is
I'm in the group
amazing.
chat. It's really nice.
Yeah.
Should bring her in.
What's Friends of the Library?
Well, no.
So as far as I know, it's like a group of volunteers, basically. I think they're like key stage 3, 4. I don't think we have anyone from 5. I mean, I'm in the group chat and sometimes I look at it, but I'm not really a friend of the library, unfortunately. But they basically help her like tidying up and like putting away books and stuff. And when it's literacy week, they help decorate the library, or for Halloween, Christmas, they're always there to like make the library look nice and clean and basically just help Miss Olmeda out however they can. But I think that it would be really useful to get, especially in key stage 3, because I think like, because at key stage 4, that's when people start becoming stubborn, and that's when they're like, oh, I don't want to read. What's the point of reading? I'm not going to read if I don't want to read. So I think that's that cause is like lost. Gabe was one of the lucky people that decided on his own account to pick up a book. But if someone had told you, I mean, I got Gabe that Star Wars book like
2 years ago.
2 years ago. And I did have a little bit of hope he was going to read it, but, you know, I was hoping, and he didn't.
I did try. I did try a couple
Yes,
times.
you did try. So, you know, I appreciated that, but I knew if he was going to read it, it had to be, like, because of his own will.
Right.
So, and you did. So, you know, like, it is successful. you know, because of your own desire to do it. But with Key Stage 3, I think maybe like Friends of the Library could help like recommend books to certain people, like a one-on-one thing. Like what kind of, like Elena said, what kind of movies do you watch? What kind of shows do you watch? Do you like this? Do you like fantasy? Do you like romance? And from then on, they can help pick a perfect book, because all it takes is one book to make a reader, I think.
I would definitely agree with that. And Miss Olmedo also has, you know, her recommendations up every so often. She'll be changing them depending, for example, when it was International Women's Day, or for Christmas, novels that are kind of, or stories, you know, graphic novels as well, magazines, non-fiction that's related to what's going on at that time, so people can find out more. You know, I think without her, the idea of reading in the school would be lost. Like, she does an amazing job to kind of, and with her kind of Friends of the Library there, which is lovely, to be honest. Albert, you were going to add something.
I had a question for Gabe specifically, because obviously I'm his father and I know his reading habits.
Right.
He's had books in his room forever, and he has. I mean, we bought him the whole How to Train Your Dragon collection. You have the Northern Lights collection. You've had all the Harry Potters there for years. We didn't have to buy them for you to read them, and yet you've never read. We've tried to encourage you to read, but you did mention your friends. You had you and Nico.
Yeah.
They read. They were avid readers. You never got the habit from them, and yet you played when you were playing FIFA. You were playing with them, right? So I mean, I know you're right. Mar's right about the attention span, engagement, etc., but how come they read and played as much as you did, and you never read? And
almost being thrown under the bus here.
I don't know. I mean,
we have had this conversation before, and the answer's always been, I don't know.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
So redeem yourself, Gabe. Do it.
Or not even redeem yourself. I think it's interesting to see. I'm curious to see what your answer would be, right? Because I think, as a teacher, I always want to see what I could do, and I'm always interested in seeing why some people are so reluctant to pick up a book for something that I find, you know, quite easy, and so I see some students do. Other students find it incredibly hard.
Well, when Gabe finishes talking, I'll tell you what trick he used to actually get into it.
Okay. All right.
So, I mean, we when we were playing together, obviously we were playing together, and then when we'd get off, I can't assume, but they probably went to read whatever book they were reading, and I just went to watch something on Netflix or on YouTube.
Study as well. You did your homework, right?
Well, yeah, that was later on. That wasn't like when they were reading.
Okay.
You know? Yeah, this is like year 8, 9, around there.
Right.
Yeah, and I just went to watch.
Never appealed to you, basically.
Yeah, I don't know. I just never felt the inclination to pick up a book and sit down and read it. Yeah.
Maybe it was also sorry,
I was just gonna quickly say the way he got into it was because of Harry Potter. Obviously, the films went first and then the book, but I thought it was really clever trick. What you did was starting reading the book as you were watching the film, right?
Yeah.
So you'd read a chapter in the book and then watch the film up to the end of that chapter, and then read a little bit more, and then that's why it took you like what 3 weeks to watch the first film, right? Because you were just reading and then watching the film and seeing the differences between the book and the film, and you be coming up to us saying like, you know, there's so much more detail in the book that there is in the film. So it's much, in that sense, it was much better to read the book, right?
Yeah, because everybody, like, you always hear people saying books are so much better because they're so much more in depth and have a lot more detail, and I was a bit kind of half skeptical about that, because I was like, I mean, how much more in detail can you really get? So yeah, I was just doing that, and then I found out that it was quite like inefficient doing that. So then I just read the whole book and then watched the whole movie.
The whole film.
And so and I just found that the most interesting part.
And did you ever get to enjoy the books as a book itself? Did you get to see all those things in your mind?
Yeah.
Because for me, that's what's fascinating about books is, you know, as I'm reading, I can picture it in my mind. I don't know if everybody does that or just me.
Yeah.
But you know, I can imagine what the characters look like, the whole setting, and that's the beauty of a book, of a well-written book, obviously.
That's why I'd say read the book before you watch the film, because otherwise when you read the book you'll just have what you've seen in the film, and then your imagination just
I don't even like watching the movie because I think to me everything in the movie's fake. The only reality is what I imagined it.
True, but then if it is a way, you know, I would have been completely had the same opinion as you, but now seeing that was one of the things that got Gabe into reading, I think the benefits of reading are much more, I think, important than, say, you know, kind of following that set idea. I mean, me as a purist with reading, I obviously would love, there are certain things, you know, All the Light You Cannot See, which is a mini series on Netflix. I've made sure I read the book first.
Yeah,
but
I have the book on my shelf.
Right, but if you find that, you know, the film kind of inspires you to watch, like you know, it's surprising how many things nowadays in kind of films or in TV series are based on, you know, novels. Think of, I think a couple of years ago, the series 13 Reasons Why. People didn't realise that was actually based on a novel, and then that helped people get into it. So I think maybe I find it hard moving away from that idea because I feel like, nope, you should read the book first. But then I'm like, well, actually, no, what do I want? I want people to read.
I have a story about that, actually, because Alexis, you know, she used to go to the school. I hope you're watching this right now. I'm going to send her the link to this podcast. She was never really a reader. I mean, sometimes she would read occasionally. She always liked history and stuff. But so she watched All the Light We Cannot See, and she bought the book. And since then, she's been on a total reading spree. Like, I think she's read, like, I don't know, at least 10 books.
Wow.
Since she started reading that. So that's what I mean. Like, one book could just, you know, push you in that direction. And she's, again, she's on, like, I have her on Goodreads. It's like book after book after book, you know. She loves reading now. And she's decided, she had dropped history for her A-levels, but she's decided that she's going to go to college for history now because of that.
Right.
So I think, like, I mean, I also agree that you should probably read it and then watch the movie if you want to. I don't really watch the movies, but I do think that there's so much benefit. If you're not a reader, then just watch the movie. Then maybe you'll be inspired to read it, like you said, sir. So.
Right. And we've mentioned now a couple of times Goodreads. So to kind of, we should probably talk about what on earth is Goodreads, right? So could one of you, I have a Goodreads account, and for me, it's brilliant. But what actually is it?
We're not sponsored, by the way.
We're not sponsored, by the way. But
if they want to.
But, yeah, if they want to.
Pretty penny.
Yeah. What actually is it?
Well, it's an app that basically you record all of your books in a sense. So you can add books that you want to read, books that you are currently reading, or books that you have read. And then you can rate them, and you can also see other people's reviews. So if there's a book that you think you want to read, I recommend looking at it on Goodreads, because then you can see different people's reviews and what they thought about it. You can update your progress. So when you're reading a book, you can say, oh, I've read this many pages out of this many pages, and then when you add your friends, that your friends will get notified about what you're reading and your progress, and then you can also see theirs. So I look at my friends' Goodreads, for example Marianna's, and then I get inspirations for books I can read from her already read list, or books that she wants to read. So I think it's very beneficial.
Right, it's a kind of a different type of social media, but focused on books. It kind of feels a bit more wholesome, a little bit more wholesome for that. And yeah, it's an application that, you know, you can have on your phone or access through the computer. Much, I suppose, like this podcast, which we're now on Spotify. Yeah. We're on YouTube.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, so again, we're out there. So again, any of the listeners, if you want to share this with your friends, family, whoever, please feel free to do so.
Yes, please.
There was a, you know, shameless plug, but I'm not even ashamed. Not even ashamed.
All right, now question. I have a question. Book that changed your life, or that got you into reading so much that you just never stopped. One of the two.
Right. Ooh, I don't know. I think that's tough. I've definitely had slumps for me for reading. Definitely. There was once I just couldn't read. You know, there was a lot going on at work. I had a lot of marking to do, and kind of outside I was just really busy. So I picked up one of the books that we teach in year 7. And I was like, damn, this is actually really good. And that got me into it. But I think as a kid, probably The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky, which there's also a film out too.
Is that the one that you reading? He said, I want to do this from now on.
Not necessarily that, because I kind of, again, like I definitely went through a period of time where I didn't read as much, particularly at university, you know, as I was studying more French and Spanish literature. I kind of took a step back from the ones that I liked. But I think you know, I've just finished a trilogy now, the Wolf Den trilogy, which is brilliant. And those are the kind of things that I like, because I wanted to get home to read it. So, but yeah, I'd say, and then obviously, like these guys have talked about, I'm a massive Harry Potter fan. When Harry Potter, you know, came out, I was 11, and then any time I basically grew up with those books, and that really changed me. But I think, you know, yeah, those definitely. And even as a young child, Alice in Wonderland, I remember reading it and being like, wow, there's this fantasy world out there. And I just remember my mind being absolutely blown by the way that it was, kind of the kind of description, I think.
I have my Goodreads here right now. I'm trying to see all my, like, the previous books I've read. So yeah, we mentioned Harry Potter. Then since I was little, like, my parents always tried to get me to read classics, because that's just, you know, who they are. So I was always kind of forced to do that. But I actually did enjoy, like, my favorite book is To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. I also love Pride and Prejudice. I think that was, like, that introduced me to my love for literature, because I always liked reading.
That's
but, like,
heavy, man.
That is heavy. I don't even like it, but I get why you do. Like, I understand, but then there's far too much description. I don't want to see 3 pages of rolling hills. But
that was The Lighthouse. There was like an entire bit that was just describing the house.
Right, but then for you, who am I to say no? That's not right. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it was like the kind of thing that, like, I mean, I also really liked Macbeth when we did it, because again, it's just like because I love, like, lit. I don't just like reading, because there's reading and then there's, like, literature. I think that you don't necessarily, you can read and you don't necessarily like literature, because I've read a lot of books, like a lot of silly crime books about serial killers and missing people in small towns that I wouldn't really consider good literature. Then I've read other ones like Gone Girl, that's both of those things, but it's still considered good lit because it's got that extra bit of substance to it. So I think that those books, Harry Potter made me discover I love reading, and Pride and Prejudice and To the Lighthouse made me discover that I love literature, if that makes sense.
That does.
It's a good distinction. Elena.
Well, sadly, I didn't actually start reading Harry Potter till like 2 years ago, because Marianna forced me to and gave me all her Harry Potter books, and so I did. But I definitely, when I was younger, I read classic British authors like Jacqueline Wilson or David Walliams, and they were quite easy books. But I had so many of their books, and I loved that genre, and I think that made me read a lot, because I still have so many of them on my shelf. And I think I also really love the Chronicles of Narnia, just any sort of fiction book that was a bit easier when I was a child, just that sort of fantasy world that I could escape from. That was really nice.
All right, Gabe.
Well, I don't know. There's not really been a book that I've been like, wow, this has changed my life.
Right.
But the Star Wars one that Mar got me, I really enjoyed that, because that was it's Star Wars, but it's something completely different.
Okay.
Because it's about one of my favorite villains in Star Wars.
Okay.
But it's like his origins, sort of.
Right.
And that's never been seen in a like movie or series before. So it was really interesting to reading about that. Whereas the Harry Potter books, I was kind of just reading them. Well, I really enjoyed them, but just to see the difference between the movie and the books. But there's not been a book that I've read that has changed me.
But I think that's okay too. I think we should still celebrate that, because you never know. Maybe in the future you might have a book that does that or not. I think, you know, I think some people can feel alienated by reading, because other people read so much. It's like with anything, any particular subject, you know, you see how good someone is at doing that particular subject, and you're like, oh, I can never get that far, so I'm not going to try.
Like the gym too.
Right, it's like, with the gym, I think reading's quite similar with that. You do what you can do, and if you get enjoyment from it, then great, or if you get something from it, then think of that more so than, you know, what you are doing. I think that's really important. Albert, what about you? A book that both changed my life and got me reading. The first book I ever read for pleasure was The Catcher in the Rye. Not very original, I know. But that changed my life. Before that, books for me were for school. Right. Okay. And I think things have changed now, because I've seen you teach your literature classes, and they're very engaging. Back in the day, we were told what the book was about. We were told what to write about the book, and where the symbolism was, and what they would ask us in the question. And of course, then there was Shakespeare.
having as a teenager having Shakespeare shoved down your throat is
Right.
never pleasurable because nobody understands that.
I disagree.
So I grew up not.
Yeah.
I didn't like reading because of that, because everything was
Right.
Was forced down our throats, and at least that's the way I remember. I'm pretty sure teachers, if any of those teachers were here, they'd beg to differ. But I can't remember having a constructive argument about any kind of book in class.
Okay.
Right? And so I just read them, and they were literally, like Mars says, they were all literature, and flamboyant words and descriptions and that. And then I had to read The Catcher in the Rye for my American diploma, and it changed my life. I realized that you can actually have a piece of literature written in a language that anybody can understand by somebody, first person account. And it really resonated with me, probably because I thought a lot like Holden Caulfield, right?
Yeah.
I thought, hey, it's me, right?
Yeah.
Except I'm not in New York. And it changed my life because I saw that. I realized that not everybody, that somebody somewhere had the same thoughts I had, at some point. Maybe not so dark, I wasn't that dark.
Right.
But and I got to reading, and then after that, everything, then I discovered Stephen King.
I
And
love
then-
Stephen King.
Right.
And then after the Stephen King, I discovered what I consider the classics, the real classics, the Beat Generation, right? Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, Henry Miller, Charles Bukowski, all those. I devoured those books, and then they all changed my life, but nothing like The Catcher in the Rye.
I think
Alright.
modern classics are important because that's like
They
a
are.
perfect example of a modern classic, The Catcher in the Rye.
Right.
Or there are so many, like To Kill a Mockingbird. That was another one that I loved, and it
Dear
was
God.
it was so sad, but it's a modern classic, and you can understand it. You read it, and you know what's
Very good
happening, but there's still like things to think about. So I think modern classics need to be pushed more at the school because I agree, Shakespeare is not for like 90% of the people who study Shakespeare.
No.
Don't.
However,
like
I have
it.
to say, when I went back, years later, I went back to revisit Shakespeare, and I loved
Right.
it. I loved it.
Yeah.
I got past the language barrier, and they're incredible stories. Those plots and turns are incredible.
Right, and even now, Shakespeare, the plot lines that he uses in his plays are still kind of repeated in other examples of literature and film. We're
Anyone
lucky.
but you.
Right, and we're lucky here that we have Miss MacDonald, who is Shakespeare's biggest fan and probably like the best expert I've ever come across. She absolutely adores Shakespeare, and I've watched her teach, and it's kind of Shakespeare comes alive.
Yeah.
Which is I think is very tough to do, particularly to an audience where English may not necessarily be their first language. So there's that there. So we've talked about what books have that really got you, but then we haven't really talked about what makes a good book. So what actually makes you...
How long do we have?
I know. So this is going to be tough. So I want you to kind of summarize what actually makes a good book that you pick it up, and makes it something worth reading or continuing. Because remember, if we have a look at the Sunday Times bestseller or the New York Times bestsellers, there have been some of the books that on there that I have thought, oh heavens, what on earth is that?
I think you should start with this answer, Mr. McKean. You're the expert. You're the...
I don't know. That's the thing. I see my tastes changing, but I think now, before, particularly when I started teaching, I felt I had to uphold the classics. I had to be a defender of the classics, which they have their place. But what I actually enjoy reading is a book that doesn't isolate me from the rest of the world, because there are some novels that I teach. I'm teaching a novel in French at the moment, and I studied at a university, and it's a great novel. It's really well written. It's a good commentary on society in France at that time period, but it's not one that I will pick up with gusto and be like, I love this book. It doesn't hook me in. It doesn't get me there. It needs to. A good book is one that doesn't push you away. It does the opposite. It brings you in with its descriptions. It brings you in with its characterizations. And even if it is something, completely simple, again, I love Agatha Christie. I love murder mysteries, and I love that kind of in-depth characterization, but then as if you know them, So I think a book should be something that is aware of its audience and brings them in.
Right.
I think that for most people, again, talking about reading, not literature, I think simple language, because I don't want to have to read a paragraph 4 times. That makes it. I do that when I read classics, when I sit myself down and I'm like, okay, I'm going to read this book. But if I'm just reading to enjoy, then I want something that's straightforward, something that's not confusing. And I also love crime or, thrillers, Stephen King, something that's just has you all like on the edge of your chair. So I think that makes a good book that can just literally like grab a reader and then you see everything and you imagine. It doesn't even feel like you're reading. It feels like you're watching something because like that's how easy it is. The fluidity is just there.
Right.
I think what makes a good book is quite specified per person, because one person might like a book a lot and then the other person doesn't. So I think it's really up to you what makes a good book. But I think what makes a good book is that when you start reading it, you're hooked, in the sense that you don't really want to stop reading it, or that you're excited to read it.
Yeah.
Because if you have the feeling that, oh, I'm picking up this book to read because I have to read, not because of just do in your spare time or for pleasure or anything, then it's sort of that, oh, that might not be the book for you. So I think one of my favorite books is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, and that was just a book that I picked up, and for some reason I loved it so much and I just couldn't put it down. And those sorts of books where I really want to read it, because at the moment I'm reading a book and I do enjoy it, but I'm not necessarily excited to read it, so I feel like that might not be the type of book for me.
Right. Oh, I'll have to check that book out. I've not heard of that.
Oh, sorry, it's such a good book.
Okay. Gabe.
Well, to be honest, I have no clue.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I think that needs to be said. Like, sometimes you're not going to know the answer to that, and that's fine.
But what I really enjoyed about the Star Wars book was it was so much like Star Wars, but it wasn't like Star Wars at the same time.
Right.
Because it was everything from the movies, but in a different, like, so far away and so different at the same time, that I could imagine everything that was going on and see everything perfectly clear.
Right.
And seeing it's kind of in a different galaxy, so it's not in the same universe, but it is at the same time.
Okay.
So I could imagine everything as new. So it wasn't influenced by the movies, apart from the main character,
right,
of course. So that's what I really enjoyed about it.
Okay. Awesome. And Albert, we have to ask you, what makes a good book for you?
I agree with Elena. I think it has to captivate you from the very beginning. I won't say the first sentence, but minimum the first paragraph.
Right.
If that goes down well, then I'm willing to go.
Right.
Everything else is up to the person and very specifically the mood you're in. I love Stephen King. I love horror thrillers, but I'm not always in the mood for that. Sometimes I'm in the mood for somebody like Nabokov, whose prose blows me away. I don't have to read. When I first read Lolita,
so good.
I totally forgot about what it was about.
Right.
Because the guy just writes. The way he writes is incredible. He's not even he wasn't even American at the time, right?
No.
Right. And anything I read by him, sometimes I'm in that kind of mood just to read some nice prose and let it carry you somewhere else. You're not even really worried about what the book's about. Sometimes you're in the mood for a graphic novel, so that's what you pick up. You don't want to read so much. You want to look at little, the world of the graphic novel. So first is that first sentence, that first paragraph that captivates you, and then second your mood, wherever the mood takes you. And that's where there's that one book for everybody at a certain given time. That's what I think.
Absolutely. Okay, so we need to round up now because I don't want Mar getting in trouble for being late to her next lesson. But I would like to finish today with each of you giving a recommendation or some advice to our student listeners of a book to read. So I'll start with a graphic novel which goes through the retellings of famous Greek myths. It's called Lore Olympus by Rachel Smythe.
I've read that one.
It's great.
It's very cute.
It's cute, and also the drawings are incredible, and the storyline is, the way that it's retold, I think is fantastic. There are 5 in the series, but you could start with just the first one. Pick it up whenever. Easy to read. That would be my recommendation. So, 3 of you to finish.
Okay, Key Stage 3, Percy Jackson, going on the whole Greek myth thing.
Lovely. Okay.
I'd say On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce her name right, but it's about the story of a Vietnamese boy growing up in America.
Lovely. And Gabe?
Well, I'm going to say the Star Wars one. It's called Star Wars Throne Ascendancy.
Okay.
It's about the best villain in Star Wars
Who
ever.
is the best villain in Star Wars ever? I've been...
Thrawn.
Who?
He's a blue guy.
Right.
Wait, when does he
Okay.
come up?
Oh man.
Yes, he's in Star Wars Rebels and as well as the new Ahsoka series.
Oh, okay.
Right.
He's a
in both
niche
of
one.
those.
Right. Okay. Okay. Wow.
He's
Well,
a
I've
niche
learned
but
something.
incredible.
Okay. And Albert, for you?
I would go for, if I had to recommend,
Yep.
I'd go for The Pillars of the Earth.
Okay.
Because it's an incredible story. It's very well written. It's easy to read.
Mhm.
And it teaches a little bit of history, a lot of history.
Great.
Teaches you about the Masons and building. Okay, you never read it?
No,
Great book.
I have not.
Great book.
All right. My reading list has been updated. Well, thank you to everyone for coming today. We are celebrating Literacy Week here at Sunnyview this week. Tomorrow, the 23rd, is our dress-up day. The English department are all coming dressed up as one story from the book. I am coming dressed as Peter Pan tomorrow, so I need to go pick up my tights after work. And there will be lots of activities going on. So I hope our students are
Can we
looking forward to that.
participate? Or
Sorry?
are we
You
locked away in the 6 months into
No. You will be reading to the little ones at some point
Aw.
this week. Yeah, no. Gabe is very excited about that. But each year group will be doing something. But I will. You'll find out more in your lessons. But thank you for listening, watching, or however you consume our podcast.
You bet.
Thank
You
you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you guys for coming. I tried to look for Miss Almeida right now. In fact, today's podcast is in the library annex.
Yes.
She's not there, unfortunately. I wanted to bring her in so we could just give her a quick clap. Miss Almeida and Miss Combe down in primary. She's the one that handles the Friends of the Library down in primary, and
Yeah.
she's the
Absolutely.
English and, in this case, reading coordinator.
Mhm.
So hats off to them for doing an incredible job.
Absolutely.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you, listeners and watchers, for listening and watching. Please do it more. And this is Sunnyview. Come join us. Thank you very much.
Thanks.